The most noticeable change when you use the new process version is in the basic pane in the right panel. The controls are changed. Let me go ahead and show you what I mean. Look at these controls. These are the old controls. They should seem very familiar to you. I'm going to hold down the Option or Alt key and click on this warning symbol. That'll bypass the warning dialog and take me right into the new process version 2012. And you can see now we have new basic control sliders. So what do they all do? First of all, I want to say don't panic because you can always go back to the old controls. In fact, when you go back to the old process versions, which I'll do now, just use Command or Control Z, you can see we get all those old ones back. So let's go to Process 2012. One of the first things you're going to see is the brightness slider is gone, and that's because brightness is now combined with exposure. So when I move the exposure slider to the left, it's controlling the brightness of the midtone values, darkening them. And when I move it to the right, it's brightening those midtone values. Now, contrast is grouped with exposure, as you can see here, and that's because it really belongs right underneath exposure. After you've set your exposure, let's go ahead and do that right now. I'm going to darken that image a little bit. I can add contrast or decrease contrast with this slider. And contrast, what contrast is doing is basically just controlling the luminance difference between pixels. So I can increase the contrast by moving the slider to the right and decrease it by moving it to the left. Okay, so what do the other sliders do? Highlights is the old recovery. Remember the recovery slider from the previous basic pane. So this will still recover the highlights, but it's actually better. It's more precise. Let me show you how this works. You may also notice that all these sliders now start in the same place. They're all in the middle, and they all kind of act more intuitively. So when I move the slider to the left, that's darkening an image. And if I move it to the right, it's lightening an image. That's going to hold true for all the controls now. So you can see as I move my highlight recovery to the left, if you look up at the histogram, the little clipping that was occurring, I can get rid of that completely. Remember that clipping is designated by this solid line on the right side of the histogram. So that control is very much like the old recovery slider, but again, it's been revamped and improved. Shadows works very much like the old fill light, but I think you'll find there's less tendency to overdo the effect. Let me show you how that works. So in fill light, you remember when you moved it to the right, it's opening up the shadow areas, almost like as if you had added a fill light when you originally shot the picture. You still have to be careful. You can go too far. But here, I've gone all the way to the right with shadows, and I'm still not getting that real, I don't even know how to describe the effect we used to get with the fill light, but it wasn't pleasant. So this control is working a little bit better. Again, it's been improved. So shadows now is more like the old fill light. So whites and blacks do just that. They control the whites. If I move it to the left, the lighter area of the image is darkening. And if I move it to the right, they're brightening up. That's a new slider. We didn't have that before. Blacks is pretty much the same as the old blacks. You're controlling the black, the dark part of the image. So if I move it to the left, we're darkening that area. And then if I move to the right, we're brightening it up. But now, as I said earlier, everything is set to 0 and all the sliders begin right in the middle there. Moving down in the basic pane, the controls under presence here are basically the same as in the previous version. However, clarity has been completely redone underneath the hood. So it's still used to adjust the midtone contrast, but positive clarity values in Lightroom 4 can be used more aggressively than in earlier versions without leading to noticeable halos around high contrast edges. You can see I can really pump this up. Well, now I'm going too far. But before, if I move clarity over that far, we would have really had a kind of a wild halo effect. So there is the new basic pane controls. You can always go back to the old ones if you want, if you use the previous earlier versions. So those are the basic controls that will appear when you select Process 2012. It may take a little bit getting used to,